The ion storm came without warning, a writhing mass of electric blue and purple that engulfed Kalen Vance's transport ship before he could outmaneuver it. Warning klaxons blared as his systems overloaded one by one. "Come on, you piece of junk," Kale growled, his calloused hands dancing across the controls. The ship shuddered violently around him, metal groaning in protest. "Just hold together long enough to make planetfall." Through the viewport, the verdant world of Xylos loomed ahead, a planet he'd only heard whispers about in the darkest corners of colony spacebars. A world of warrior tribes, ancient traditions, and bioluminescent forests that were said to consume the unwary. A world that had largely rejected outside contact. And now, it was his only hope for survival. The entry into atmosphere was brutal. Heat shields failing, navigation systems fried. Kale relied on instinct and the little manual flight training he'd received before becoming a freelance hauler. The ship careened downward, skimming treetops before crashing into a clearing, carving a deep furrow in the soil before finally coming to rest. Kale's head throbbed as he unbuckled himself from the pilot's seat. Blood trickled from a cut above his eyebrow, but a quick systems check confirmed what he already knew. The hyperdrive motivator was completely fried, along with several other critical components. Without them, he was stranded. "Perfect," he muttered, grabbing his emergency pack and blaster. Just another day in the glamorous life of a space hauler. As he descended the ship's ramp, Xylos assaulted his senses. The air was thick with earthy scents and strange, sweet fragrances he couldn't identify. Massive trees towered overhead, their bark iridescent with patches of blue-green light that seemed to pulse with a rhythm of their own. In the distance, a massive tree dwarfed all others, its immense trunk spiraling upward, crowned with a canopy that seemed to touch the clouds themselves. A world tree, he realized, the legendary heart of Xylosan tribal territories. Kale consulted his portable scanner, searching for any nearby settlements or outposts that might have the components he needed. The device flickered weakly, its circuits still recovering from the ion storm, but it detected metals and power signatures about 2 miles east. It was his best shot. He'd been hiking through the forest for about an hour when he heard it, the unmistakable clash of metal on metal, followed by shouts and grunts of combat. Instinct told him to avoid the conflict, to remember that this wasn't his world or his fight. But something pulled him forward, perhaps simple human curiosity, or maybe something more. Crouching behind a massive phosphorescent root, Kale witnessed the scene unfold. A lone warrior, lithe and fast, fought against 5 attackers. The lone fighter was female, her movements graceful yet deadly, wielding a sword that emitted an eerie green glow. Her attackers wore masks crafted to resemble twisted animal faces, their weapons dark and jagged. Despite her skill, the woman was clearly outnumbered. Blood stained her right side where she'd already taken a wound, and her movements were slowing. One of the masked attackers lunged forward, his blade slicing across her arm, causing her to cry out and drop her glowing sword. Something hot and angry sparked in Kale's chest. 5 against 1 weren't odds he could walk away from, colonial politics be damned. He burst from his hiding place as the attackers closed in for the kill. The nearest masked warrior turned in surprise, but too late. Kale's fist connected with the man's jaw, sending him sprawling backward. Without breaking stride, Kale dove for the fallen, glowing sword, rolling to his feet with the weapon in hand. The blade felt strangely alive in his grip, vibrating with an energy that seemed to resonate with his own heightened heartbeat. Its light flared brighter, the green glow intensifying until it cast long shadows through the forest clearing. "Who wants to go next?" he growled at the remaining attackers. They hesitated, their masked faces turning toward one another in apparent confusion. Then, with renewed determination, 2 charged at once. Kale wasn't a swordsman by any stretch. His combat experience came from bar fights and rough encounters in the colony outskirts, but the blade in his hand seemed almost to guide him. He parried the first attack with surprising ease, the glowing sword meeting the dark blade with a shower of sparks. Pivoting, he slashed at the second attacker, who barely jumped back in time. The wounded woman had regained her footing and retrieved a dagger from her belt. Together, they form an impromptu alliance against the attackers. "Behind you!" she called out in heavily accented standard as one of the masked warriors tried to flank Kale. He spun just in time, blade arcing through the air to deflect a potentially fatal blow. The attacker stumbled back, and Kale pressed his advantage, driving forward with a series of wild but effective slashes that forced the warrior to retreat further. In the distance, a low, haunting sound echoed through the trees, a horn call that made the masked attackers freeze. They exchanged quick glances before backing away, one of them shouting something in a language Kale couldn't understand. Then, as quickly as the conflict had begun, they melted into the shadows of the forest. Breathing heavily, Kale turned to the woman he'd helped. She was staring at him, her expression a mixture of shock, confusion, and what looked distinctly like horror. For the first time, he got a clear look at her face. High cheekbones, piercing amber eyes, and intricate tattoos that traced delicate patterns along her temples and jawline. Her dark hair was braided elaborately, with feathers and small glowing stones woven through it. "You okay?" he asked, lowering the still glowing sword. Instead of answering, she took a step back, her eyes fixed on the weapon in his hand. That's when Kale noticed they were no longer alone. From the surrounding forest, warriors emerged. A dozen at least, their clothing similar to the woman's, adorned with the same tribal markings but in different patterns. Unlike the attackers, their faces were uncovered, though no less intimidating for it. An elderly man stepped forward from a group, his face a roadmap of wrinkles and tattoos, his eyes widening as they focused on the glowing sword in Kale's grip. "Impossible," the old man whispered in surprisingly clear standard. An outsider wielding the soul blade to protect the last sky whisper, heir. He turned to the woman, speaking rapidly in their native tongue. She replied angrily, gesturing at Kale and the sword with obvious distress. The old man shook his head firmly before turning back to Kale. "You have invoked the ancient law," he said solemnly, "one not seen enacted in 7 generations. You, outsider, by wielding the soul blade in defense of its bearer during mortal peril, have become soul-bound to Lady Lyra Vanya, last heir of the Skywhisper clan." Kale blinked, certain he had misunderstood. "Oh, what now?" "You are to be her husband," the elder clarified, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "The soul bond is sacred and irreversible. The blade has accepted you." He gestured to the sword, which still glowed brightly in Kale's hand, though he could have sworn the light now pulsed in rhythm with his increasingly rapid heartbeat. Lyra stepped forward, her face a storm of emotions as she held out her hand for the sword. "This is outrageous," she said in accented standard. "He knows nothing of our ways. He is not of Xylos. This cannot stand." Kale, still struggling to process what was happening, handed the sword back to her. "Look, I was just trying to help. I don't want to. I'm not looking to," he stammered. "The law is absolute," the elder interrupted. "The soul blade has chosen. You will return with us to the Skywhisper Fortress, outsider." "What is your name?" "Kalen Vance," he replied automatically, his mind racing. "But everyone calls me Kale." "Then Kale of the Stars, you will come with us now. The Shadowclaw warriors may return, and we must reach safer ground before nightfall." As the elder turned to give instructions to his warriors, Lyra stepped closer to Kale, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "You should have stayed hidden, outsider. Your interference has sealed both our fates." With that cryptic warning, she sheathed the now-dimmed sword at her hip and strode away, leaving Kale standing amid the alien forest with the distinct feeling that his life had just been irrevocably changed. The Skywhisper Fortress was unlike anything Kale had ever seen, a marvel of architecture that seemed both ancient and oddly advanced. Built within and around one of the massive world trees, its structures spiraled up the enormous trunk, connected by bridges and platforms that blended seamlessly with the living wood. Bioluminescent fungi and crystals provided natural lighting, casting the entire fortress in an ethereal blue-green glow as twilight descended. Kale was led through a series of arching doorways carved directly into the living wood, flanked by solemn warriors who regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. They finally arrived at a large circular chamber high in the tree, where a council of elders awaited, seated in a semicircle around a central hearth where blue flames danced without apparent fuel. Lyra was already there, standing rigidly beside an ornate stand where her sword now rested, its glow subdued but still visible even in the well-lit chamber. The eldest of the council, a woman whose face was almost completely covered in intricate tattoos, spoke first in their native language. The same elder who had addressed Kale in the forest translated. High Elder Serenia welcomes you to the heart of Skywhisper territory, though she notes that your arrival comes at a troubled time. The translator's expression remained impassive. She wishes to explain the gravity of what has transpired today. For the next hour, Kale listened as the elders explained the situation. The Skywhisper clan, once powerful and respected across Xylos, had been in decline for generations. Their world tree's energy was waning, and with it, their influence and protection. The Shadowclaw clan, led by the ambitious warlord Zarkas, had been encroaching on their territory, destroying outlying villages and targeting key resources. Lyra, as the last direct descendant of the Skywhisper's founding bloodline, was preparing for a sacred ritual at their world tree's core, a ceremony that might restore its energy and save their clan from extinction. The ambush Kale had witnessed was Zarkas' attempt to prevent this ritual from occurring. And now, the translator elder continued, by wielding the soul blade in her defense, you have triggered the ancient Soulbond law. This law was created in our darkest times, when our ancestors foresaw that our bloodlines might weaken. It ensures that any warrior worthy enough to wield a clan's soul blade in protection of its rightful bearer would bring new strength to our bloodline through union. Union, Kale repeated flatly, as in marriage, as in a binding of souls, lives, and purpose, the elder corrected. Far deeper than what your people call marriage. Lyra, who had been silent throughout the explanation, finally spoke. It is an outdated law from desperate times, she said tensely, and it places us both in an impossible position. I cannot complete my sacred duty to my clan with an outsider who knows nothing of our ways bound to me. The High Elder responded in their language, her tone firm but not unkind. She says, the translator provided that the law provides for this. You have one moon cycle to prove yourself worthy through the traditional bonding trials. If you succeed, the union will be blessed and finalized. If you fail, he hesitated. If I fail, Kale prompted, you will be banished from Skywhisper territory, and Lady Lyra will lose her right to clan protection under our most sacred laws, leaving our clan vulnerable to Shadowclaw claims. Kale looked between the elders and Lyra, whose face had gone pale at these words. And if I just leave now? The same, the elder replied solemnly. Once the soul blade has accepted an outsider's touch in defense of its bearer, the trial must be completed, one way or another. Kale ran a hand through his short, dark hair in frustration. I was just trying to help. I didn't sign up for any of this. Nor did I, Lyra snapped, her amber eyes flashing. But you have bound us both to this path with your interference. My interference? Kale shot back. Would you rather I'd let those Shadowclaw warriors kill you? The chamber fell silent at his outburst. After a moment, the High Elder spoke again, her voice softer this time. She says the translator provided that fate works in ways we cannot always understand. Perhaps there is purpose in your arrival, Star Traveler, at this darkest hour for the Skywhisper clan. Kale wanted to argue further, to insist that he needed to repair his ship and return to his life among the stars. But looking at the faces around him, the elders with their desperate hope, the warriors with their wary respect, and Lyra with her conflicted anger, he felt something shift inside him. He'd spent years drifting through space, taking odd jobs, belonging nowhere. Maybe, just maybe, there was a reason he'd crashed on this particular planet at this particular time. One moon cycle, he said finally. What exactly do these trials involve? Relief visibly swept through the chamber. The High Elder nodded and began to explain through her translator. You will face 3 sacred trials: the shadow hunt in the bioluminescent forest, the ancestral trial of wisdom at the ancient temple, and finally, the World Tree bonding ritual, where you must protect Lady Lyra as she completes her connection with our World Tree's core. And in the meantime, Kale asked, Lady Lyra will instruct you in our ways, our history, and basic combat techniques. You will learn what it means to be Sky Whisperer. Kale glanced at Lyra, who looked as though she'd rather face another 5 Shadowclaw warriors than teach him anything. This was going to be interesting. After the council meeting concluded, Kale was shown to quarters within the living structure of the World Tree, a surprisingly comfortable chamber with furniture that seemed to have been grown rather than built from the living wood. A servant explained how to use the strange fixtures, including a basin that continuously circulated fresh water from the tree's own internal systems. Shortly after settling in, there was a firm knock at his door. Lyra stood in the hallway, her expression guarded, but no longer openly hostile. "We begin at dawn," she said without preamble. "Be ready." Kale leaned against the doorframe, studying her. "Look, I'm sorry about all this. If there's any way to undo it." "There isn't," she cut him off. "The Soul Blade has chosen, and our laws are absolute." She hesitated, then added more softly, "But I appreciate that you intervened. Few would have risked themselves for a stranger." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, her footsteps nearly silent on the wooden floor. Dawn on Xylos brought a light that filtered through the canopy in dappled patterns of gold and green. Kale met Lyra in a training area carved into a massive branch of the World Tree, open to the air on one side, with a breathtaking view of the forest stretching to the horizon. "First," Lyra said, tossing him a wooden practice sword, "you must understand what you're dealing with. The Soul Blade is not merely a weapon. It contains the essence of my ancestors, a fragment of their spirits and wisdom. It only allows itself to be wielded by those with pure hearts and unwavering will." "So why did it let me use it?" Kale asked, catching the practice sword and testing its balance. A ghost of a smile touched Lyra's lips. "That is what we both wish to know." She unsheathed her own practice blade. "Show me how you fight, Star Traveler." What followed was both humbling and enlightening for Kale. Lyra moved with a fluid grace that made his own combat style seem crude and unrefined by comparison. Yet she nodded appreciatively at certain moments, where he employed an unexpected feint or when he used his greater strength to his advantage. "Your style is unconventional," she acknowledged after disarming him for the 5th time. "But there is potential. The Soul Blade saw something in you." Over the next few days, their training sessions expanded beyond combat. Lyra taught him about Xylosan culture, their reverence for the world trees that provided energy and resources, their clan structure, their belief in the interconnectedness of all living things. Kale learned that the bioluminescence pervading the forest was not merely aesthetic, but a manifestation of the planet's unique energy field, one that the Xylosan tribes had learned to harness over generations. During these lessons, he caught glimpses of the person behind Lyra's formal exterior. Her dry humor when explaining particularly elaborate customs, her passion when recounting her clan's history, her grief when speaking of their decline. "The Shadowclaw were once our allies," she explained one evening as they walked along a branch pathway high above the forest floor. "But their current chief, Zarkaz, believes that strength comes only through dominance. He sees our clan's connection to our world tree weakening and seeks to claim it for himself, believing it will transfer its power to his bloodline if ours is eliminated." "And will it?" Kale asked. Lyra's expression darkened. "No. If our bloodline ends, the connection ends. The world tree would eventually wither and die, taking all life in its territory with it. Zarkaz is too blinded by ambition to understand this. That's why the ritual you're preparing for is so important," Kale realized. She nodded. "It's our last chance to renew the bond. No one has successfully completed it in 3 generations." As Kale absorbed this information, an alarm call echoed through the branches, a series of musical notes that immediately sent Sky Whisper warriors rushing to defensive positions. "Shadowclaw, Lyra whispered, immediately reaching for her soul blade. "They've breached our outer perimeter." Without hesitation, Kale followed her as she raced along the pathways toward a small settlement at the base of the World Tree. By the time they arrived, smoke was rising from several structures, and Skywhisper defenders were already engaged with massed Shadowclaw raiders. Lyra drew her soul blade, its green light flaring in response to her touch. "Stay close," she instructed Kale, handing him a standard warrior's blade. "Remember what we've practiced." Together, they plunged into the fray. The actual combat was nothing like their practice sessions, chaotic, desperate, with no rules or form. Yet Kale found himself keeping pace with Lyra, their movements unconsciously synchronizing as they defended villagers and pushed back attackers. A child scream cut through the chaos. Kale spun to see a young Skywhisper girl cornered by a Shadowclaw warrior. Without thinking, he threw himself forward, interposing his blade between the warrior's weapon and the child. "Get her to safety," he shouted to a nearby villager, who quickly pulled the child away. The Shadowclaw warrior snarled something unintelligible and pressed his attack. Kale found himself driven back step by step, his borrowed blade barely holding against the onslaught. Just as his guard was about to break, a flash of green cut between them. Lyra, her soul blade, severing the Shadowclaw's weapon at the hilt. With a fluid motion, she spun and delivered a kick that sent the attacker sprawling. "We protect each other," she said simply, extending a hand to pull Kale back to his feet. The raid was eventually repelled, though not without cost. Several buildings were damaged, and many Skywhisper warriors bore wounds. As the defenders regrouped, Kale found himself helping tend to the injured, applying healing salves under the direction of a clan healer. That night, as fires were lit to honor those who had fallen and celebrate those who had survived, Kale felt a strange sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years, perhaps ever. The Skywhisper people no longer looked at him with suspicion, but with a cautious acceptance. He had fought for them, bled for them. Lyra found him sitting alone on a platform overlooking the nighttime forest, where bioluminescent life pulsed in waves of blue and green far below. "You fought well today," she said, settling beside him. "The child you saved is the daughter of our master craftsman." "I just reacted," Kale admitted. "Anyone would have done the same." Lyra's amber eyes studied him in the dim light. "No, not anyone." She hesitated, then continued. "Tomorrow you face your first trial, the Shadow Hunt. It is dangerous, even for those born to this world." "Tell me about it," he prompted. She explained that he would need to venture deep into the bioluminescent forest at night, to a region where shadow creatures dwelled. There he must harvest a rare herb that grew only in the darkness between light sources, a plant essential for many of their healing remedies and sacred rituals. "The shadows themselves will try to confuse you, lead you astray," she warned. "Many have been lost forever in those woods." Kale nodded slowly. "Any advice?" To his surprise, Lyra reached out and took his hand. Her touch sent an unexpected warmth through him. "Trust your instincts. They've served you well so far." She placed something in his palm, a small crystal that emitted a faint blue glow. "This will help you find your way back, but use it sparingly. Too much light attracts the shadow beasts." Their eyes met, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Then Lyra withdrew her hand and stood. "Rest well, Kale of the Stars. Tomorrow will test everything you've learned." The Shadow Hunt proved every bit as challenging as Lyra had warned. The forest at night transformed into an alien landscape of shifting lights and impenetrable darkness. The bioluminescent fungi and plants that had seemed so beautiful from a distance became disorienting up close, creating false paths and illusions that threatened to lead Kale astray. Worse were the shadow beasts, creatures that seemed formed from darkness itself, visible only by the absence of light they created as they moved. They stalked Kale through the forest, their presence betrayed only by soft chittering sounds and the occasional glimpse of gleaming eyes reflecting the bioluminescence. Using the survival skills he'd honed on remote planets and the new knowledge Lyra had imparted, Kale navigated deeper into the forest. He found the sacred herb growing exactly where Lyra had described. In the perfect darkness between two bioluminescent clearings, its black leaves absorbing rather than emitting light. As he carefully harvested the herb, storing it in the special container he'd been provided, a shadow beast finally made its move, lunging from the darkness with teeth and claws that seemed formed from the void itself. Kale rolled away, remembering Lyra's warning not to look directly at the creatures lest their darkness overwhelm his mind. The journey back was a blur of narrow escapes and tactical retreats, using the environment as Lyra had taught him, creating distractions with bioluminescent fungi that flared when disturbed, using natural choke points to evade pursuers. The small crystal she had given him proved invaluable, its light seeming to strengthen when he was on the correct path back to Skywhisper territory. When he finally emerged from the deep forest, dawn was breaking over Xylos. A group of Skywhisper warriors waited at the forest's edge, Lyra among them. Her carefully neutral expression couldn't quite hide her relief at seeing him return. "You succeeded," she stated as he presented the harvested herb, her voice betraying a hint of surprise and perhaps pride. Was there ever any doubt? Kale grinned, though exhaustion threatened to collapse him where he stood. The herb was presented to the Council of Elders, who declared his first trial complete. As he was escorted back to his quarters to rest, Kale caught Lyra watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher, something between curiosity and a growing respect. The days that followed brought increasing Shadowclaw aggression. Small raiding parties tested Skywhisper defenses, never pressing for a full-scale battle, but causing constant strain and draining resources. Zarkaz was clearly biding his time, waiting for the moment of greatest vulnerability. Kale found himself fully integrated into the clan's defense strategy, his off-world perspective offering new tactics that often caught the Shadowclaw by surprise. He and Lyra frequently fought side by side, their combat styles gradually melding into something that utilized both her graceful precision and his unpredictable adaptability. More surprising to Kale was how quickly he was adapting to life within the Skywhisper clan. The rhythm of days, marked by the World Tree's subtle changes rather than artificial time units. The communal meals where stories and knowledge were shared as importantly as food. The deep spiritual connection the clan maintained with their environment, so different from the utilitarian approach to planets he was accustomed to in colonial space. Most surprising of all was his evolving relationship with Lyra. Their initial antagonism had given way to a wary partnership, which in turn was blossoming into something deeper. They spent evenings talking of their different worlds, Kale describing the stars and distant planets he'd visited, Lyra sharing legends and wisdom passed down through generations of her family. "Have you ever felt like you belonged anywhere?" she asked him one night as they sat in a small meditation garden near the top of the World Tree, the twin moons of Xylos casting silver light through the canopy. Kale considered the question seriously. "Not really. My parents were colony hoppers, never stayed in one place long enough to put down roots. When they died in a mining accident, I was already working transport runs. Just kept moving after that. And yet you adapt so easily here," Lyra observed. "The elders say it's as if your spirit recognizes this place." Kale smiled wryly. "Maybe it does." He hesitated, then asked the question that had been on his mind. "If I hadn't crashed here, if someone else had wielded the soul blade, would you already be bonded to another warrior?" Lyra's expression grew distant. There were expectations, political alliances suggested by the council, but the soul blade has never responded to another as it did to you. She looked at him directly. "It has been in my family for 10 generations, and I have carried it since I was 16. It has never once glowed for anyone but me, until you held it." The weight of her words hung between them, full of implications neither was quite ready to voice. 2 days later, Kale faced his second trial, the ancestral trial of wisdom. Deep within an ancient temple carved in a stone at the base of the World Tree, he confronted a series of puzzles and symbolic challenges that tested not his physical prowess, but his understanding of Skywhisper values and history. The final chamber presented him with a wall covered in luminous symbols that shifted and changed as he watched. He needed to arrange them in a pattern that represented the core truth of the Sky Whisper philosophy, but with thousands of possible combinations and no obvious solution, he found himself stuck. As he stared at the shifting wall, he recalled something Lyra had mentioned during one of their evening talks, that the Sky Whisper believed true strength came not from dominance, but from connection, that their power flowed not from controlling the world tree, but from serving as its partners and protectors. With that insight, Kale began arranging the symbols in a pattern of mutual support and cyclical energy flow, rather than the hierarchical structures he had first attempted. As the final symbol clicked into place, the entire wall glowed with the same green light as Lyra's soul blade, and a hidden door swung open, revealing the exit and completion of his second trial. The elders were impressed, though not as surprised as they had been by his success in the shadow hunt. Something was changing in how they viewed him. No longer an outsider who had stumbled into their customs, but a potential true member of their clan. That night, during the celebration of his second trial's completion, Lyra sought him out. She wore ceremonial attire, layers of flowing fabric in the clan's colors, her hair elaborately braided with glowing stones and feathers that caught the light. "Walk with me," she said softly, leading him away from the festivities to a secluded grove where crystal formations caught and amplified the bioluminescent light, creating a cathedral-like space of colored radiance. "This is beautiful," Kale breathed, turning slowly to take in the sight. "It is our most sacred space, where we commune with ancestors," Lyra explained. She turned to face him fully. "Kale, you must understand something before the final trial. The World Tree bonding ritual is not merely symbolic. It is dangerous, more so than anything you've faced." "I figure as much," he replied. "But I'll be there to protect you, right? That's my role." Lyra shook her head. "It's not that simple. During the ritual, I will be vulnerable not just physically, but spiritually. If Zarkus attacks then, as we believe he plans to, you will need to defend not just my body, but my spirit's connection to the World Tree." "How do I do that?" Kale asked, suddenly uncertain. Instead of answering directly, Lyra drew her soul blade. In the crystal grove, its light seemed even more alive, dancing with patterns that matched the rhythm of the World Tree's own bioluminescence. "Take it," she said, offering the hilt to him. Kale hesitated. "The last time I did that, I accidentally got engaged to you." A smile touched Lyra's lips, a rare, genuine expression that transformed her face. "This time, it is offered freely." As his fingers closed around the hilt, the sword's glow intensified. But this time, he was prepared for the sensation of resonance, the feeling of ancient consciousness brushing against his own. "Feel it," Lyra instructed, stepping closer until they were nearly touching. "Not with your hand, but with your mind, your heart." Kale closed his eyes, focusing on the subtle vibration traveling up his arm. Gradually, he became aware of something else. Whispers at the edge of perception, impressions of faces and lives long past, emotions and wisdom preserved within the blade itself. "The soul blade carries a fragment of every bearer who came before me," Lyra explained quietly. "In the final trial, you must learn to channel that essence, to let it flow through you as you protect me." She placed her hand over his on the hilt, and the connection intensified. Kale gasped as images flashed through his mind. Generations of warriors, each defending the World Tree in their time. And with the images came a sense of purpose, a belonging, stronger than anything he had ever known. When he opened his eyes, Lyra was watching him with an intensity that made his breath catch. Without consciously deciding to, he leaned forward and she met him halfway. Their kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepening with a hunger that surprised them both. The soul blade between them pulsed with light, casting their entwined shadows across the crystal grove. When they finally parted, Lyra's amber eyes searched his face. "The bond between us was forced by circumstance," she said softly. "But what grows now is of our own making." "I wouldn't change how we met," Kale admitted. "Crash landing and all." Lyra smiled again, taking back the soul blade and sheathing it. 3 days from now, we complete the final trial. Whether we succeed or fail, we do so together. The morning of the final trial dawned with an unnatural stillness. No birds sang in the forest canopy. No wind stirred the leaves of the world tree. The Skywhisper warriors moved through their fortress with tense anticipation. Weapons checked and rechecked, positions fortified. Everyone felt it. This day would decide their fate. Kale was provided with ceremonial armor, lightweight but strong, crafted from materials he couldn't identify. Embedded in the breastplate was a crystal similar to the one Lyra had given him for the shadow hunt, but larger and pulsing with energy drawn directly from the world tree. It will help you resist Zarka's dark energy weapons, explained the master craftsman whose daughter Kale had saved. And it may help you channel the Soul Blade's power if needed. When Lyra appeared, she wore ritual robes of startling white, embroidered with symbols that glowed faintly even in daylight. Her hair was unbound for the first time since Kale had met her, falling in waves past her shoulders. The Soul Blade hung at her hip, its light subdued but present. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steady despite the gravity of what they were about to attempt. Kale nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." The ritual chamber lay at the very heart of the world tree, accessible only through a spiraling passage that descended through the massive trunk into the roots below. As they made their way downward, escorted by solemn Skywhisper warriors and elders, the living wood around them pulsed with increasing luminescence, as if the tree itself was aware of their presence and purpose. The chamber itself took Kale's breath away. A perfect circle carved from the living heart of the tree, its walls rippled with patterns of light that moved like flowing water. At the center stood a raised dais, surrounded by a shallow pool of luminous liquid that cast reflections across the ceiling. Ancient roots descended from above, their tips just touching the surface of the pool. "The essence of the world tree," Lyra explained quietly, seeing his wonder. "Collected over centuries. This is where I will connect with the consciousness of our world tree and attempt to renew our clan's bond." High Elder Serenia and the council took positions around the perimeter of the chamber. The elder who had first translated for Kale approached him. "You must stand guard at the edge of the dais," he instructed. "Lady Lyra will enter a trance state and will be unable to defend herself. You must ensure nothing interrupts the ritual once it begins." Kale nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of the sword he'd been provided. "What about the Soul Blade?" he asked, noticing that Lyra had drawn it. "She will use it to channel the energies," the elder explained. "It serves as both conduit and protection." As the preparations continued, Kale's senses, heightened by his training with Lyra, detected a subtle change in the air. A tension, an electricity that hadn't been there before. He caught Lyra's eye and saw that she felt it too. "Something's wrong," he murmured as she approached the dais. "Zarka's," she confirmed softly. "He's coming. I can feel his dark energy approaching. The ritual must proceed regardless. We may not get another chance." From the entrance to the chamber came the sounds of distant combat, shouts, and the clash of weapons. "They're trying to break through our defenses," one of the warriors reported urgently. "Multiple entry points under attack." The High Elder spoke rapidly in their native tongue, and half the warriors immediately departed to reinforce the outer defenses. Those remaining formed a tighter circle around the ritual space. Lyra stepped onto the dais, the soul blade glowing brilliantly in her grip. "Whatever happens," she said to Kale, her amber eyes locked with his, "do not let the connection break once it's established. My life and the life of our entire clan depends on it." Kale moved to his position at the edge of the dais. "I'll protect you with my last breath," he promised, and knew in that moment he meant it with absolute conviction. Lyra began the ritual, her voice rising in a melodious chant as she raised the soul blade above her head. The green light from the blade intensified, reaching toward the hanging roots like searching fingers. Where light touched root, new illumination sparked and spread upward, as if awakening the world tree from a long slumber. The pool around the dais began to swirl, its glow strengthening in response to Lyra's chant. Tendrils of luminous liquid rose into the air, defying gravity to dance around her form. Kale watched in awe as Lyra's feet gradually lifted from the dais, her body suspended in the nexus of energy she was creating. Then chaos erupted. A thunderous explosion shook the chamber as a section of the wall burst inward. Through the breach poured Shadowclaw warriors, their faces concealed behind their distinctive masks, weapons drawn and glowing with an ominous purple light that seemed to absorb rather than emit energy. The remaining Skywhisper defenders engaged immediately, forming a protective barrier between the attackers and the ritual dais. But they were outnumbered, and Kale could see they wouldn't hold for long. Behind a front line of attackers strode a tall figure whose presence commanded attention. Unlike his warriors, his face was uncovered, revealing sharp features, skin marked with jagged black tattoos, and eyes that glowed with the same purple energy as their weapons. Zarkaz had come personally to ensure the ritual's failure. "Hold the line," Kale shouted to the defenders, torn between his promise to stay with Lyra and his desire to join the fight. Above him, Lyra continued her chant, seemingly oblivious to the battle erupting around her, her body now completely enveloped in swirling green energy. The defenders fought valiantly, but the Shadowclaw pressed forward with overwhelming numbers. One by one, Skywhisper warriors fell or were forced back. Soon, only a handful remained between the attackers and the ritual dais. Zarkaz stepped forward, raising a hand to halt his warriors' advance. "Enough of this," he called out, his voice carrying an unnatural resonance. "The Skywhisper clan is finished. Their world tree will be mine, as it should have been generations ago." He focused his attention on Kale. "So you're the outsider who thinks to claim what is rightfully mine." His mouth twisted in a mocking smile. "How fitting that you will witness the end of what you sought to protect." With a gesture from Zarkaz, his warriors parted, allowing him a clear path forward. The remaining Skywhisper defenders moved to intercept, but with another casual wave of his hand, Zarkaz released a pulse of purple energy that sent them flying backward against the chamber walls. Kale drew his sword, positioning himself firmly between Zarkaz and the dais where Lyra floated in her trance, still channeling the ritual energies. "You'll have to go through me first," he stated flatly. Zarkaz laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally in the chamber. Gladly, he drew his own weapon, a sword that seemed forged from darkness itself, purple energy crawling along its length like lightning in negative space. "I'll enjoy watching an outsider die for a clan that isn't even his." "That's where you're wrong," Kale replied, settling into a combat stance as Lyra had taught him. "They are my clan now." With inhuman speed, Zarkaz attacked, his first strike nearly overwhelmed Kale's defense, the dark energy of his blade sending painful vibrations through Kale's arm when their swords met. Only the training with Lyra saved him from immediate defeat as he redirected rather than blocked, using Zarkaz's momentum against him. But Zarkaz was a warrior born and trained, with decades of experience and the dark energy he'd somehow harnessed augmenting his abilities. Each exchange left Kale more defensive, giving ground inch by inch, forced back toward the dais and Lyra. "You fight well for an outsider," Zarkaz acknowledged as they circled. "But you cannot win. The Skywhisper line ends today, and with it, their claim to this world tree." "You're a fool," Kale gasped, blood trickling from a cut on his cheek where Zarkaz's blade had nearly found his eye. "Lyra told me what happens if her bloodline ends. The world tree dies too." Something flickered across Zarkaz's face, doubt perhaps, or hidden knowledge. "Lies they tell to maintain their power. I have studied the old texts. The world tree simply needs a strong bloodline to channel its power." His expression darkened. "My bloodline." He pressed forward with renewed fury, his dark blade a blur of motion. Kale defended desperately, but a sweeping low strike caught him off guard. Pain exploded along his thigh as the blade bit deep, and he stumbled to one knee. Zarkaz stood over him, blade raised for a killing blow. "Die knowing you failed her, outsider." As the dark blade descended, something changed in the chamber's atmosphere. The swirling green energy around Lyra suddenly expanded outward in a shockwave, washing over everyone present. Kale felt it pass through him like a warm breeze, invigorating rather than harmful. But Zarkaz screamed, his attack faltering as the purple energy in his blade seemed to flicker and dim. "It's working," gasped one of the Sky Whisper elders who had regained consciousness. "The ritual is succeeding." Fury contorted Zarkaz's features. Abandoning Kale, he turned toward Lyra, who remained suspended in her trance state, unaware of the danger. With a roar of rage, he raised his weapon and charged directly at her floating form. "No!" Kale shouted, forcing himself to his feet despite the agony in his wounded leg. He knew he couldn't reach Zarkaz in time, couldn't intercept the strike that would kill Lyra and doom the entire clan. In that moment of desperate need, Kale remembered Lyra's words in the Crystal Grove. "Feel it, not with your hand, but with your mind, your heart." He reached out, not physically, but with his consciousness, calling to the soul blade that Lyra held above her head, channeling the World Tree's energy. To everyone's shock, including his own, the soul blade responded. It tore free from Lyra's grasp and flew across the chamber into Kale's outstretched hand. The moment his fingers closed around the hilt, the green energy exploded to new intensity, enveloping him in light that healed his wound and filled him with power he'd never experienced. Zarkaz faltered at the sight, his attack on Lyra aborted as he whirled to face this new threat. "Impossible," he snarled. "No outsider can channel the Sky Whisper spirit." But Kale was already moving, the soul blade, guiding his actions as much as he was wielding it. He felt the presence of generations of Sky Whisper warriors flowing through him, lending him their skill and knowledge. The blade moved with impossible speed and precision, meeting Zarkaz's dark weapon with a shower of energy that illuminated the entire chamber. Unlike their earlier exchange, Kale was no longer on the defensive. The soul blade seemed to anticipate Zarkaz's every move, countering with an elegance that belied Kale's limited training. More than that, each contact between the blades seemed to drain the purple energy from Zarkaz's weapon, transferring it to the soul blade, where it was purified into green light. "What are you?" Zarkaz demanded, Real fear entering his voice for the first time as he was driven back step by step. Kale didn't answer with words. The soul blade sang through the air in a final arc that shattered Zarkaz's dark blade into fragments. The Shadowclaw leader fell to his knees, his power broken, looking up at Kale with hatred and disbelief. "Finish it," Zarkaz spat. "Prove you are as bloodthirsty as you claim I am." Kale leveled the soul blade at Zarkaz's throat, but did not strike. "Your defeat is enough," he said quietly. The Sky Whisper way is not dominance, but balance. Above them, Lyra's ritual reached its climax. The green energy connecting her to the World Tree's roots suddenly flared blindingly bright, expanding outward in concentric circles that passed through the chamber walls and beyond, spreading throughout the entire World Tree. Where the light touched the remaining Shadowclaw warriors, their dark weapons deactivated, leaving them disarmed and vulnerable. The energy wave continued outward, visible through the breach in the wall as it traveled through the forest. Beyond, a ripple of renewal and balance restoring natural order. Shadowclaw warriors outside the chamber threw down their weapons and fled as their dark power sources failed them. As the ritual energy began to subside, Lyra slowly descended from her suspended position. Kale rushed forward, catching her gently as her feet touched the dais. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on his face with weary recognition. "You did it," she whispered, a smile touching her lips. "You channeled the soul blade." "We did it," Kale corrected. "The ritual did it work?" The High Elder approached, her ancient face alight with wonder and joy. She spoke rapidly in their language, gesturing toward the chamber walls where the luminous patterns now pulsed with renewed vigor. "She says the bond is restored," translated the elder who had first spoken to Kale. "Stronger than it has been in generations. The World Tree acknowledges both of you an unprecedented occurrence. Kale looked down at the soul blade in his hand, its light now gentle but steady. Then he looked at Lyra, still cradled in his arm. I guess it really was fate that brought me crashing into your world. Her fingers traced his jawline gently. The soul blade knew before either of us did. She glanced at Zarkas, who was now being bound by recovered Sky Whisper warriors. What will happen to him? That is for the council to decide, said the translator elder. But his power is broken. Without his dark energy weapons, the Shadow Claw will need to find a new path, perhaps returning to their ancient alliance with Sky Whisper. In the days that followed, Kale faced a decision he never expected to confront. His ship's damaged components had been retrieved by Sky Whisper scouts and could be repaired with their help. He could return to his life among the stars, to the freedom of open space and the familiar rhythm of transport runs. Or he could stay on Xylos, with Lyra and the clan that had become his family. The decision was formally presented to him during a ceremony held beneath the branches of the now thriving World Tree. The entire Sky Whisper clan gathered, along with representatives from other clans who had heard of the outsider who had channeled the Soul Blade and helped defeat Zarkas. High Elder Serenia spoke at length, her words translated for Kale's benefit, officially recognizing him as Lyra's soul-bonded partner and offering him permanent place within the clan. As was tradition, he was given until the rising of the twin moons to provide his answer. As twilight descended, Kale sought solitude at the ship crash site, now partially reclaimed by the forest. Lyra found him there, standing beside the damaged hull that had brought him to this world. "You're thinking of leaving," she said softly, not a question, but an observation. Kale ran his hand along the ship's metal skin. "For most of my life, this was the closest thing I had to a home. Always moving, never putting down roots." He turned to face her. "I didn't know what I was missing." "And now?" Lyra asked, her expression carefully neutral despite the emotion Kale could sense beneath the surface. "Now I know exactly what I'd be giving up if I left." He stepped toward her, taking both her hands in his. "My whole life, I've been searching for something I couldn't name. I thought it was the next horizon, the next planet, the next job. But it was this, belonging somewhere with someone. With you." Relief and joy transformed Lyra's face. "Then you'll stay?" "Wild shadow beasts couldn't drag me away," Kale confirmed with a smile. "Besides, I'm told I have responsibilities as a soul-bonded partner that I've barely begun to learn." Lyra's laugh was like music. Many responsibilities and privileges. She leaned forward to kiss him, a promise of all that lay ahead. 1 month later, as Xylos' twin moons rose full above the forest canopy, Kale stood on a balcony high in the World Tree Fortress beside Lyra, now officially his wife according to both Sky Whisper tradition and his own heart. Below them stretched the bioluminescent forest, more vibrant than ever after the renewal of the World Tree's energy. "It's still strange sometimes," he admitted, "to think that all this began because I crashed on your planet and picked up a sword I didn't understand." Lyra leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "The elders say nothing happens without purpose. Your arrival, the Soul Blade's response, even the timing of Zarkas' attack, all threads in a pattern larger than we can see." Kale wrapped his arm around her waist. "Well, I'm grateful for whatever cosmic force decided to fry my ship's systems precisely when and where it did." "As am I," Lyra agreed with a smile. "Though perhaps next time you could choose a less dramatic entrance to a new planet." "No promises," Kale laughed, pulling her closer. "But I do promise that whatever challenges come next, we'll face them together." "Together," Lyra echoed, her hand finding his ass. They looked out over their world, his new home, her ancestral legacy, and their shared future stretching before them like the endless, glowing forest below. In the heart of the World Tree beneath them, the Soul Blade rested in its ceremonial stand, its green light pulsing in perfect harmony with the massive tree's own rhythm, a symbol of balance restored and new beginnings forged from the most unexpected of meetings.